It can be taught, it should be taught, and it will be taught. It's one last point. We've been talking about whether or not frugality is like learned or it's an innate trait or what it is. And this is also on the back of I like talking about something, and I think we've generally not run out of time. There's no time limit on this, but once it gets to 15 minutes, it's like, all right, we probably should cut this off and do something else. But the last time we joined you on One Last Point, I was making the point about a very interesting car buying experience, which I thought was, well, pretty indicative of how many car experiences often go, unfortunately. And I think part of that was then saying, yeah, we bought this car in cash, and that's not a flex. That's just a kind of an insight into how my wife and I live frugally. We've got enough cash to buy a car. I talked about, like, I think I watched a Dave Ramsey video in college, and he was like, yeah, buy a clunker. Then, next step up, buy the next clunker. Then just keep buying cars in cash. So that's what we've done. And it got me thinking, I've always been like that. I think I told producer Glenn on the last episode of One Last Point that I still have the first dollar that I was ever given. And it's in this blue little zipper type envelope thing, which I also still have. And that was in my sock drawer growing up. I just, every dollar I ever made, earned, was given, went into that. And I don't know, I've always been a saver. So I was curious, like, is that something that you're just born with? Like, how does that work? And so I decided to look into it a little bit, and turns out, not really. I don't want to bury the lead here. Yeah, it turns out not exactly something that you're definitely born with. There were two different studies that came up. One from the Journal of Consumer Research, which obviously they would want to know whether or not frugality is a learned trait or it's innate and you're born with it. It turns out the heritability, maybe that's how you pronounce that, is estimated between 20 and 30%, with the conclusion being that it's actually mostly environmental causes that make somebody either frugal or not. There was another study in 2011, that first one was from 1999, that effectively did the same type of thing and found that it's about 25% heritability, and then also another 30 to 40% tacked on with upbringing and family environment, and then the rest is like unique experience. What builds a frugal person? What builds a person that is a saver as opposed to somebody that just spends their money willy-nilly? Ultimately, it is about 25%, about a quarter of you is inherited through genes or genetics, whatever you want to call it, that impacts your decision making as far as, at least in this particular case, frugality and financial experiences. But I thought that was actually a good thing, in my opinion, because to me, a quarter of you being born frugal, which I think I probably have to have had that quarter, like that's all, that space is taken up. But that also said to me, okay, well then 75% of it is learned. Like 75 can be taught. People can be taught. In this particular case, frugality and how to manage money and that sort of stuff, but also just like politics, right? If what you inherit in the way that you think about things is biologically only about 25%, and I recognize this is kind of like a soft science and people are kind of guessing at this, but if that's the case, and that's what the research has come to the conclusion of, then to me that says, okay, well, 75% of the personality then can be taught specific things that are good or bad, right? You can go down either path, and ideally, obviously, you teach somebody how to do the good portion of that, which is save financially, which is to be frugal, which is, how to conduct yourself on a financial platform, but also, I guess, also then a political and lifestyle platform. That to me is good news. I think the more of you that is able to be taught and guided in the proper direction, now obviously assuming that proper direction guidance exists, the better, because I don't know, if you were to tell me like 90% of the human personality is already like set in stone at birth, that's kind of concerning, honestly, and there's really nothing you can do to move the needle. But the fact that there's this much leeway space, again, allegedly 75% of the person in this particular example is, learned and taught and molded by experiences and family environment and all that sort of stuff. That to me says there's a lot of ability to move the needle one way or the other, and to me that's good news. Producer Glenn, I'm curious, do you think I honestly got to think that, well, if I look back on my family, my grandparents were super frugal. I had two sets of grandparents, like everyone does. I've got the immigrant grandparents are as frugal as frugality gets, right? Like there are no find an immigrant grandparent, doesn't matter from where, like if they're from Samoa like my grandparents, or like Eastern Europe or Africa, anywhere that you come from, if you come into this country, you are the penny pinchiest person in the history of the world. I remember my grandma, Glenn, I don't this this well, in some cultures, in Polynesian culture, you do a money dance, right? You do a siva at a wedding. You dance and people throw money at you. I remember my grandma at one of my cousin's birthday parties was on the floor picking up dollar bills that weren't hers, but she was like, well, there's money on the ground. Anyways, all that to be said is I had two sets of grandparents. My mom's parents too were also very, 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 very frugal and spent their money in things that like made sense to purchase, not necessarily they were necessities, not necessarily frivolous purchases. Anyways, producer Glenn, long-winded way of asking, where do you fall on that spectrum of saving money and having a financial plan? Like, do you feel like, oh, I was born with this, or I have a brother or a sister who was not born with this, and it shows? Where's that for you?
Let me just take this opportunity to ask for an advance on my paycheck.
No,
I'm totally kidding. I'm totally kidding. Actually, I think. I'm one of three brothers, no sisters, and I'm the oldest of the three. So I'm thinking in terms of my family growing up, and the youngest of the three was easily the most frugal, much like our father, who is, or he's retired now. He's still alive, but he may be watching this on YouTube at some point in the near future, so he'll let me know. But he was pretty frugal as an accountant, and just generally his personality was frugal. The youngest brother learned that. The middle and me, the oldest, we learned it later. I didn't start off super frugal. As soon as I got a job, I had spending money. I didn't have saving money. And I want to say around my mid-20s, I think I was 26 or so when I first started like saving for retirement. And immediately, like it was that moment when you realize, oh shoot, so that gets invested and it grows like all these years. I better start now. Oh shoot! And then you realize, shit, it started like when I started working.
Yeah.
But c'est la vie, it's gone, right? You can only do with what you've got now. So I figured out, and I transitioned from more of a guy who liked to spend all his money on things that he wanted in the moment to someone who clearly still buys plenty of books, which I love. Mm-hmm. But I also do make a priority of saving, and hopefully for the right things. And now that I'm also married, that helps too, because it's not just me affected by my good or bad decisions.
Well, so it sounds like circumstance will push people into frugality, and again, this is a subset of a broader understanding of like how human personalities and characteristics are developed, I guess. But I don't know, I was surprised that it seems like this low of a number, which, because at a certain point, right, if so much of the way that you make decisions is hereditary driven, then there's a certain point where it becomes difficult to blame somebody for bad decisions, right? Like it becomes difficult to, again, if 90% of you and the 90% of people were like, well, this is just they were born with this and they have massive amounts of credit card debt. Like at a certain point, you got to go, shucks, like they didn't have any choice. But considering the fact that, it seems like such a small number is something that you're born with, and environmental factors factor in.
There's cultural. I think we talked about this last time. There's cultural factors as well. So like if you grew up around people who just took out debt, chances are you're likely to do what you've seen other people do. And if you grew up around people that invested their savings, like, religiously, chances are you'll probably be more apt to invest what you earn and instead of spending it or just
And
letting it,
true,
you know.
but also too, like, culture is a choice, right? Like, you and we, fortunately enough, have inherited the culture of the West, but at the same time it is our choice to participate in that culture. I am much more likely to have sympathy for and help somebody who is, born to an entirely, a big disadvantage, right? Like, if there's some physical limiters, some mental limiters, I 100% am willing to help people out on that. I'm not easily willing to help somebody out who made a choice that makes it more difficult for them to help themselves. In other words, like, if you got a big face tattoo and you're like, shoot, I can't find a job. Like, I don't know how much sympathy I have for you because of that choice. But again, if you're physically deformed in some way, shape, or form that doesn't allow you to participate in the workforce, I much would rather help those people through our church community as opposed to the government. But I'm willing to help you, right? And so, like, to me, this says, hey, there's a lot of room for personal choices and personal growth, not coming from a hereditary element, but coming from, the culture that you exist in, unique experiences that happen to you. But those things definitely shape you, which says to me, okay, in a lot of ways, there are decisions that people make that either put them on a good or bad trajectory.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's really none of my business, but I don't particularly have a ton of sympathy for people who make decisions. Now, again, that there's obviously a much bigger conversation of redemption there. Like, I'm totally a fan of that, and I think if you can acknowledge that you've made some poor decisions, in this case financially, but other life decisions, I am 100% willing to help people who are on the pathway to redemption. But for people, especially in our political system, that are like, well, this debt just happened to them because of the way that they are. Like, not really buying that argument, really.
No, I like the data that you provided. I mean, granted, it's from a soft science, so it's hard to say.
Yeah, it's hard to tell
specifically, but I mean, broad strokes. These are all learnable things. It's not something that you are, fated to experience throughout your life. If you look and you say, wow, I'm making poor financial decisions, and you see someone who shows you a better way, you can learn the better way. You can change your trajectory. You can do the Y refi and get yourself fixed up, right?
Yeah.
And you're off to the races, Plenty of people go from rags to riches and vice versa, because they started off one way and at some point changed their trajectory, whether for better or worse. So, I mean, I like that that's the case, because, I mean, if I was bound to spend money the way I did when I got my first job at 18, like, I don't think we'd have ever met, because I wouldn't have been shooting super high to do anything.
Well, I guess the thing that I often forget, Glenn, and I think we'll just end on this, but I had forgotten about white privilege. That's actually the only way that you can gain any sort of momentum in life. It's for some reason, people believe your skin color. So there's that. Maybe that will be the next diatribe that leads into the following one last point that you will see on Monday. Remember, we only do these Monday through Thursday, one last point, but you go watch the real show on Real America's Voice Monday through Friday. Get a whole extra day there. But producer Glenn, thank you so much. We will. This has been One Last Point.